I told him about the trust, I continued. And that you were coming. He was not thrilled. I can imagine, Garrison snorted. What did he say? He accused me of being against his happiness, I said bitterly. And that I'm a stubborn old woman who can't see past her own nose. That's not true, and you know it, Garrison said firmly. You've always been the most selfless mother I've ever known. You put his interests above your career, your personal life, everything. His words, so unexpectedly warm and understanding, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I said quietly. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. Don't let his ingratitude make you doubt yourself. Garrison advised. You did everything you could and more. If he doesn't appreciate, that's his problem, not yours. We talked a little longer. Garrison told me his flight was arriving in Dallas in 2 days and he would come straight to the hospital. I offered to have Carol pick him up at the airport, but he declined, saying he would take a taxi. After our conversation, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I had a feeling that everything would be okay, despite the rift with my son. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new phase in my life, a phase where I would finally live for myself and not for others. I looked out the window at Dallas at night, at the lights of the skyscrapers twinkling in the darkness, and thought about my home. The home where I grew up, where I raised my son. A home full of memories, both good and bad. I wasn't ready to leave it, especially not the way Edwin had planned. The family trust was my father's idea, a practical man who always thought several steps ahead. He created it after his friend lost his family home due to the machinations of an unscrupulous son-in-law. Clarice, he told me then, never trust anyone. Not even those closest to you when it comes to inheritance. People change when money is involved. I never thought those words would prove prophetic when it came to my own son. But here we are. Under the terms of the trust, the house could not be sold without the consent of all beneficiaries, including Harrison, my brother Frank, his children, and even Edwin himself, who seemed to have forgotten that he was also part of this legal mechanism. I wonder what my father would have said if he had seen his grandson trying to circumvent the protection he had created. He probably wouldn't have been surprised. He was always a realist when it came to human nature. My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. The screen lit up with Honora's name. I hesitated, unsure whether to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Good evening, Honora, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Clarissa, she said, her tone cold and businesslike. Edwin told me about your conversation and the so-called family trust. Not so-called, but very real, I corrected her. Regardless of its status, she continued, your behavior is extremely selfish. Edwin and I are trying to ensure you have a comfortable retirement, and you are resisting out of some stubborn desire to prove your independence. I took a deep breath, trying not to give in to anger. Honora, I appreciate your concern, I began, although it wasn't true. That I will make my own decisions about my life. And I don't want to move into a nursing home, no matter how wonderful the conditions are there. You don't understand the consequences of your decision, she said, her voice betraying her irritation. What if you have another crisis? What if next time there's no one around to call an ambulance? That's a risk I'm willing to take, I replied firmly. Like millions of other elderly people who prefer to stay in their own homes, and you're willing to ruin your relationship with your son over this. Her voice became accusatory. Edwin is very upset. He feels that you didn't trust him, that you chose your ex-husband over your own son. I didn't choose between them, I objected. I'm simply defending my right to decide how I want to live. And if Edwin really cared about my wishes and not just what's convenient for the two of you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. A tense silence fell on the other end of the line. You know, Clarice, Honora finally said, her voice tinged with barely contained anger. I always told Edwin that you were manipulating him. You're using his guilt over the Divorcetto control his life. And here's the proof. You chose to contact his father, the man who abandoned you both instead of trusting your own son. That's not true, I said quietly, feeling her words hit me where it hurt the most. I never used Edwin. And Garrison didn't abandon us. We separated by mutual consent, and has always kept in touch with his son. Of course, defend him. Honora sneered. In any case, Edwin and I are washing our hands of this. Deal with your problems yourselves, but don't expect any help from us when things get worse. She hung up before I could respond. I slowly lowered the phone, feeling a stranger mixture of anger, pain, and oddly enough, relief. At least now all the cards were on the table. No more pretense, no more fake smiles and insincere hugs. I knew there were many challenges ahead. My health was indeed at risk, and living alone with diabetes at my age was risky. But I also knew that I wasn't ready to give up my independence, my home, the life I had built. As for Edwin and Honora, well, maybe someday my son will understand that I wasn't trying to control his life or interfere with his happiness. I just wanted respect and a say in decisions that affected my own destiny. And if he never understands that, maybe I'll just have to accept it as another loss in a life full of losses and gains. I closed my eyes, suddenly feeling exhausted from all the emotional turmoil. Tomorrow will be a new day. Tomorrow I would be stronger. For now, I allowed myself to drift off into a dream where there was no betrayal, no pain, no disappointment, only peace. The day of my discharge came a week after I was admitted to the hospital. Dr. Coleman was pleased with my progress, though he didn't hide his concern. Your readings have improved significantly, Mrs. Hampshire. But diabetes is a chronic condition that requires constant monitoring, he said, looking over my chart. You'll need to be even more careful about your diet. Check your blood sugar regularly and strictly follow your new medication schedule. I nodded, listening carefully to his instructions. Over the past week, I had thought a lot and decided to take my health more seriously. Not for Edwin or his plans for my house, but for myself. Will someone be meeting you at the hospital? Dr. Coleman asked, ending our conversation. Yes, I replied. My ex-husband is coming. The doctor raised his eyebrows slightly, but said nothing. He was probably used to his patients' complicated family situations. All right, I'll write you all the necessary prescriptions and recommendations. And Mrs. Hampshire, he looked at me with sincere concern. Please don't neglect your health. At your age, diabetes can quickly lead to serious complications. I understand. Doctor, I nodded. And thank you for your concern. After he left, I began gathering my things. A week in the hospital had accumulated quite a lot. The pajamas Carol had brought, books, toiletries, my phone and charger. As I packed them into a bag, I thought about my upcoming meeting with Harrison. We hadn't seen each other in almost 15 years since Edwin married Honor. Garrison had flown in for feuding. We had exchanged a few polite words at the reception, and he had flown back to Arizona the next day. Since then, our communication had been limited to occasional phone calls and even more occasional emails. I knew that he had divorced his second wife a few years ago and was successfully developing his business manufacturing specialty Dequin for solar power stations. I wonder if he has changed in appearance. The last time I saw him, his dark hair was just beginning to grey at the temples, and the first wrinkles were appearing at the corners of his eyes. He must be 69 now, 2 years older than me. Time had surely left its mark on him, just as it had on me. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. I expected to see the nurse with the latest instructions, but instead, Garrison was standing in the doorway. The first thing I noticed was that his once dark hair was now completely grey, but it was still thick and neatly trimmed. The wrinkles on his face had deepened, especially around his eyes and mouth, but this gave him the appearance of a man wise with experience rather than an old man. He was still fit and trim, dressed in simple but high-quality ends and a blue shirt. "Clarice," he said with a slight smile, and I recognized his voice, though it had deepened a little with age. "Garrison," I replied, feeling a strange mixture of awkwardness and joy. "You're early. I thought you'd be coming closer to lunchtime." "My flight arrived earlier than expected," he explained, stepping into the ward. "I hope you don't mind." "Of course not," I shook my head. "I'm almost ready. Dr. Coleman has already signed my discharge papers." Garrison nodded and looked around as if unsure what to do next. This uncertainty, so uncharacteristic of him, made me smile. It seemed I wasn't the only one who felt awkward about this meeting after so many years. "How are you feeling?" he finalized. "Better," I replied. "The doctors say the crisis has passed, but I need to be more attentive to my health." "You've always been too careless in that regard," Garrison remarked, and there was a hint of old familiar criticism in his voice. "Remember how you tried to hide your tonsillitis from me because you didn't want to cancel our trip to the lake? And in the end, we didn't go anywhere because I passed out in the car." I finished recalling that long-ago episode. "Yes, I remember. You were furious." "Not furious. Terrified," he corrected. "I thought you were having a heart attack." We both fell silent, lost in our memories. It was strange how easily we slipped back into our old way of communicating, as if 15 years apart had never mattered. "I took a taxi," Garrison said, breaking the silence. "It's waiting downstairs. Are you ready?" "Yes," I nodded, zipping up my bag. "I just need to wait for the nurse with the final instructions and prescriptions." Right on cue, Bernice entered the room with a folder of documents. "Here are your prescriptions and dietary recommendations, Mrs. New Hampshire," she said, handing me the papers. "And don't forget your follow-up appointment in 2 weeks." "Thank you, Bernice," I smiled. "For everything." The nurse nodded and turned to Garrison. "Are you Mrs. Hampshire's husband?" "Ex," he corrected. "But I'll be taking her home." "All right," Bernice nodded. "Make sure she doesn't overexert herself for the first few days and sticks to her diet. No sugar, minimal salt, more fresh vegetables and lean protein. I'll make sure." Garrison nodded seriously, and I felt a slight irritation at how they were discussing as if I were a child. Finally, all the formalities were completed, and the orderly brought a wheelchair to take me to the exit. Standard procedure for all patients being discharged. I felt strong enough to walk on my own, but rules are rules. Garrison carried my bag and walked beside the wheelchair, staring silently ahead. I studied his profile, noting the changes that had taken place over the years. His wrinkles had deepened. His features had become slightly sharper, but overall he was still the same Garrison I had once loved. A taxi was waiting for us outside the hospital. Garrison helped me get in, then sat down next to me and gave the driver my address. "You remember?" I asked, surprised. "Of course," he shrugged. "I lived in that house for 15 years, Clarice. Some things you never forget." The ride was relatively quiet. I looked out the window at the familiar streets of Dallas, enjoying the view of the city after a week spent in a hospital room. Garrison periodically responded to messages on his phone, probably business matters. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, I felt a strange excitement. It was as if I was returning not just from the hospital, but from a long journey. And in a sense, that was true. My life had changed dramatically over the past week. Garrison paid the driver and helped me out of the car. We slowly climbed the steps to the porch. I took my keys out of my purse, but before I could put them in the lock, the door swung open. Edwin stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Mom." He looked from me to Garrison. "Dad." "Hello, Edwin," Garrison said calmly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I live here," my son replied coldly, and I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Since when?" I asked. "Since you went to the hospital," Edwin explained, stepping back so we could enter. "Someone had to look after the house." I entered the hallway and immediately noticed that changes. There were boxes in the corner. Anora's coat and Edwin's jacket were hanging on the coat rack, and their keys and mail were on the table. "Did you move in?" I asked bluntly. "Temporarily," Edwin replied, avoiding my gaze. "We thought you might need some help after you got out of the hospital." Anora came out of the living room, and her face changed when she saw Garrison. "Oh," she said with feigned surprise. "What a surprise!" "Hello, Anora." Garrison nodded. "It's nice to see you again." I could have sworn she was momentarily taken aback, not knowing how to react. Then her face took on an expression of polite interest. "Are you here to visit Clarissa?" "How kind of you. I've come to help Clarissa sort out some issues," Garrison replied calmly. "In particular, the situation surrounding the house." Anora's face froze and Edwin visibly tensed. "Let's go into the living room," I suggested, feeling the tension mounting. "I need to sit down." The living room had changed, too. My old sofa cushions had been replaced with new ones in bright colors, and there were modern paintings on the walls that I had never seen before. On the coffee table were catalogs of designer furniture and wallpaper samples. "Are you redecorating?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just freshening things up a bit," Anora replied with feigned nonchalance. "This room could use an update." I slowly sank into my favorite armchair, the only piece of furniture that seemed to have escaped. "They're renovations." Garrison sat down on the sofa opposite me while Edwin and Anora remained standing as if hesitating to join us. "So," Garrison began, shifting his gaze from Edwin to Anora, "Clarissa told me our planning to sell this house." "That's none of your business," Edwin replied sharply. "You haven't been part of this family for a long time." Perhaps Garrison agreed, but I am still the beneficiary of the family trust that owns this house, and as such, I have a say in any decisions regarding its sale. Edwin shot me an accusing look. "You've really got him involved in this after everything he did to us." "He didn't do anything to us, Edwin," I said wearily. "Your father and I separated by mutual consent. It was a mature decision between two adults." "He abandoned us," Edwin exclaimed, his voice filled with the lingering resentment of a 12-year-old boy. "No," Garrison said firmly. "I didn't abandon you, Edwin. I moved to another city, but I've always been your father. I called you every week, came to all your important events, paid for your education." "That wasn't enough," Edwin said bitterly. "You weren't there when I really needed you." "Perhaps." Garrison nodded. "And if so, I'm sorry. That isn't about the past. It's about the present, about trying to sell your mother's house without her consent. Wedded it for her own good," Anora interjected. "Clarice needs constant care, which we can't provide. A nursing home is the best solution. And that's why you've already moved here and started remodeling?" Garrison asked, glancing around the changed living room. "Are you preparing the house for sale or to live here yourselves?" Anora blushed and Edwin clenched his fists. "We just wanted to make the house look more modern," she said. "It would increase its value if we sold it. And of course, some of the money from the sale would go toward opening your bookstore," Garrison added. "What a convenient coincidence. Who told you that?" Anna shot me an indignant look. Edwin, I replied calmly during our phone conversation. It was just an option. Edwin said, embarrassed. Not the main goal, but important enough to mention it to a mother who just suffered a serious diabetic crisis. Garrison remarked. Edwin and Honora exchanged quick glances, clearly not expecting this turn of events. Listen, Edwin said, changing tactics. We're all tired and upset. Let's put this conversation on hold. Mum just got out of the hospital and needs some rest. Good idea, I agreed. But first, I'd like to clarify a few things. First, I'm not moving into a nursing home. Second, this house is not for sale. And third, I would appreciate it if you would restore my living room to its former state and remove your belongings from the hallway. Are you kicking us out? Edwin asked incredulously. No. I shook my head. I just want you to respect my decisions and my space. You're always welcome to visit. But living here, no. That's not an option. And who will take care of you? Honora asked with feigned concern. Dr. Coleman said, You need constant supervision. I'll be in Dallas for 2 weeks, Garrison interjected. And I'll help Clarissa during that time. Then we'll find another solution. Maybe a nurse who will come several times a week. And you think you can do better than us? Honora exclaimed indignantly. You who haven't seen her in 15 years. Maybe not better, Garrison replied calmly. But at least I'm not trying to sell our house and use the money for my own purposes. Edwin turned pale with anger. You have no right to speak that way about our motives. You know nothing about our life, about our difficulties. I know enough, Garrison said firmly. And I know that the family trust set up by Clarissa's father exists precisely to prevent situations like this. The house cannot be sold without the consent of all the beneficiaries, including me and Uncle Frank. That old trust, Honora snorted contemptuously. We consulted a lawyer. He said, there are ways to get around those outdated restrictions. Really? Garrison raised an eyebrow. I wonder what Judge Ramirez, who helped draft this trust and is still its trustee, would say to that. Honora's face fell, and Edwin swallowed nervously. You're bluffing, she said uncertainly. Not at all. Garrison shook his head. I spoke with Judge Ramirez yesterday. Hessens his regards, by the way, and he said he'd be happy to meet with you if you have any questions about the trust. A heavy silence fell. I watched my son and daughter-in-law's faces, seeing their confidence gradually give way to uncertainty, and then outright alarm. This isn't fair, Edwin finally said. You've ganged up on us. No, dear, I replied gently. We're just protecting my interests and my right to make my own decisions about my life. What you weren't planning to do is unfair. We wanted what was best, Edwin repeated stubbornly. But the confidence had drained from his voice. Perhaps. Garrison nodded. But you didn't ask Clarice what she wanted. You decided for her. Because she's stubborn and can't see what's best for her, Honor exclaimed. Or maybe she just has her own opinion which differs from yours, Garrison remarked calmly. And as an adult, she has a right to that opinion. Edwin and Honora exchanged glances again, clearly unsure of what to do next. Their plan was falling apart before their eyes, and they weren't prepared for this turn of events. All right, Edwin finally said. If you insist, we won't sell the house, but I still believe that Mum needs constant care, and a nursing home is the best option. I appreciate your concern, Edwin, I said, trying to keep my voice soft. But the decision is mine, and I choose to stay in my house. What about the money? Honora asked suddenly. We've already put down a deposit for a place at Golden. Autumn. It's a lot of money, which you'll lose because you acted without Clarice's consent. Garrison said firmly. That's not fair, Honora exclaimed indignantly. We spent time and money thinking about what was best for Clarissa, and now we're having to pay for it. You could have avoided these expenses if you had simply asked me what I wanted, I remarked. Instead of deciding for me, Edwin looked dejected. He sank down on the sofa and covered his face with his hands. What about the bookshop? He asked, hollow-eyed. We were counting on the money from selling the house. Perhaps you should consider a business loan, Garrison suggested, or find investors. There are many legitimate ways to start a business without selling your mother's house. Anora sat down next to her husband, her face a mixture of disappointment and anger. I always knew you'd choose him over us, she said bitterly. You never approved of our marriage, never accepted. That's not true, Anora. I shook my head. I've always wanted Edwin to be happy, and if you make him happy, I'm glad. But that doesn't mean I have to let you run my life. We just wanted to help. Edwin repeated, looking up at me. You can't manage on your own, Mom. This crisis has proven that. I admit I need help. I nodded. But not in the form of a nursing home. We'll find another solution. What? Anora asked skeptically. You're going to live here alone and risk another crisis. Or maybe your ex-husband will move in with you. She shot a mocking glance at Garrison. We haven't decided yet. Garrison replied calmly. But we have time to consider. All the options. Sure. Anora snorted. It's that way of you against us as always. No one is against you, I said wearily. We just want you to respect my decisions. Decisions that could cost you your life, Edwin said grimly. That's my risk, I replied firmly, and my choice. Garrison got up from the sofa. I think that's no for today. Clarice needs some rest. We can continue this conversation tomorrow when everyone has calmed down a bit. There will be no tomorrow, Anora said sharply, also standing up. We're leaving today and don't expect us to be frequent guests in this house. Anora, Edwin began, but she cut him off. No, Edwin, I'm not going to sit here and listen to them accuse us of selfish motives when all we wanted to do was help. Pack your things. We're leaving. Edwin looked torn between his wife and his parents. For a moment, an expression of uncertainty, almost boyish confusion flashed across his face. But then it was replaced by determination. Anora is right, he said, standing up. We've done everything we can. If you prefer to risk your health, Mother, that's your choice. But don't expect you to be there when things go wrong. I never expected anything from you but respect for my decisions, I replied quietly. And I'm sorry that even that proved too much. Edwin and Anora left the living room, and soon we could hear them gathering their things in the hallway. Garrison looked at me silently, his face a mixture of sympathy and admiration. You've always been strong, Clarice, he said quietly. But today you supersede yourself. I don't feel strong. I admitted more like empty. That's normal, he nodded. Confronting loved ones is always exhausting. But you did what had to be done. Spring sunshine flooded the spacious room that had once been a guest bedroom and was now an art studio. I stood in front of the easel, concentrating on applying strokes of acrylic paint to the canvas. A landscape gradually emerged on the painting. Field elm trees on my street illuminated by the setting sun. It wasn't a masterpiece, of course, but for someone who had picked up a paintbrush just 6 months ago, it was quite a descent effort. Time flew by unnoticed as I painted. Sometimes I even forgot about lunch, completely immersed in the creative process. Only the sound of the timer reminding me to check my blood sugar brought me back to reality. 6 months had passed since the day Edwin and Anora left my house, slamming the door loudly and promising never to return. 6 months that changed my life more than the previous 10 years. After they left, Garrison stayed with me for 2 weeks as he had promised. We gradually got to know each other again, overcoming the initial awkwardness and finding common ground. He helped me with shopping, drove me to doctor's appointments, and made sure I took my medication on time. In the evenings, we sat in the living room and talked about the past, about life after divorce, about our mistakes and regrets. "I never thought we'd be sitting here together like this again," he said one evening as we drank herbal tea in front of the fireplace. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Yes, I agreed. Although I would have preferred this particular surprise under different circumstances. Garrison nodded understandingly. "Has Edwin called yet?" I shook my head. "Number, and I'm not sure I want him to. After everything that's happened, I didn't know if we can ever go back to a normal relationship." "Give him time," Garrison advised. "He's stubborn. He gets that from both of us. But eventually he'll realize he was wrong." I wasn't so sure about that. Booty kept my thoughts to myself. The wound from my son's betrayal was still too fresh for me to think about reconciliation. Before he left, Garrison helped me hire a nurse who came 3 times a week to check on me and help with cleaning. He also insisted on installing an emergency call system, a bracelet with a button that I had to wear at all times. In case of an emergency, one press would automatically call an ambulance and send a notification to my contacts. "Garrison and Carol, I don't want to seem intrusive," he said, showing me how the bracelet worked. "But it will give us both peace of mind." I agreed, understanding his concern. My health did require constant monitoring, and this small precaution was a reasonable measure. After Harrison left for Arizona, I thought our communication would once again be reduced to occasional phone calls. But instead, heckled almost every day just to see how I was doing. And then a month later, He showed up again, this time on business. "We're expanding into Texas," he explained. "We're opening an office in Dallas. I'll be coming here regularly over the next few months." His visits became an integral part of my new life. Every 2 or 3 weeks, Garrison would spend a few days in Dallas. He stayed at a hotel, but spent most of his free time at my house. We went to restaurants, visited exhibitions, walked in the park, simple things I had long since stopped doing, locked in a routine of work and loneliness. It was Garrison who pushed me to finally fulfill a long-held dream of taking up painting. "You always said you wanted to paint when you retired," he reminded me during one of his visits. "Why not start now? At my age?" I laughed, a little late for new beginnings, don't you think? "Grandma Moses started painting at 78, he replied. "You're only 67. You have plenty of time to become a famous artist." And so, an art studio put in my house. Garrison helped move the furniture from the guest bedroom to the storage room. And then we went to an art supply store together where he insisted on buying high-quality materials. "If you're going to do it right," he said, putting canvases, brushes, paints, and an easel into the basket. At first, I felt ridiculous standing in front of a blank canvas with a brush in my hand. My first attempts were terrible. Crooked lines, incorrect proportions, faded colors. But gradually, thanks to online lessons and books on painting techniques, I began to make progress. Painting became my passion, my way of expressing the feelings and emotions that I had suppressed for so long. At the end of autumn, I even decided to sign up for painting classes at a local community center. There I met a group of other beginner artists, mostly people my age, looking for new hobbies in retirement. We quickly became friends, and soon I was going with them to exhibitions, cafes, and even plein air painting sessions in city parks. My life, which until recently had revolved around work and rare visits from my son, was suddenly filled with new people, events, and interests. I felt more alive than I had in the last 20 years. Of course, there were difficulties. My health required constant attention. I had 2 minor crises when my blood sugar rose dangerously high. But thanks to my emergency bracelet, help arrived quickly and I was able to avoid serious consequences. In December, Garrison surprised me by announcing that he was moving to Dallas for good. The office is doing well, he explained. And I need to be here to oversee the process besides. He hesitated. I enjoy spending time with you, Clarice, more than I expected. I didn't know how to respond. Our relationship had become warm and friendly over the past few months, but the thought of anything more had never crossed my mind. We had been married for 15 years and divorced 20 years ago. Romantic interest seemed absurd at Orridge, and after everything that had happened between us. Don't look at me like that. Garrison laughed, seeing my confusion. I'm not proposing. I'm just saying that I enjoy your company, and if you don't mind, I'd like to continue seeing you regularly. I enjoy your company too, I replied honestly, and he'd love to see you more often. So, Garrison became a regular part of my life. He bought a small house 15 minutes away from me, and often stopped by after work. We cooked dinner together, watched old movies, discussed books and venues. Sometimes he stayed overnight in the guest room, especially if we stayed up late. My friends from the art club were thrilled with our story. Reunited after all these years, exclaimed Doris, a romantic 72-year-old widow. It's like in the movies. We're just friends. I corrected her every time. Former spouses who have learned to appreciate each other's company. But secretly, I caught myself thinking that our relationship was indeed taking on a tone of something more than just friendship. I noticed how Garrison sometimes looked at me when he thought I wasn't looking. How his hand lingered on my shoulder a little longer than necessary. How he always found a reason to touch me, to fix a strand of hair, brush an invisible speck of dust off my clothes. And what's more surprising, I found that I liked it. At 67, after 20 years of loneliness, I suddenly felt like a desirable woman. It was strange, a little scary, and incredibly exciting. In early spring, almost 6 months after I was discharged from the hospital, something happened that I had both been waiting for and dreading. I ran into Edwin. It happened at a large shopping mall in downtown Dallas. I went to an art supply store to buy some new paintbrushes, and decided to have a cup of coffee at the cafe across the street. And there at a table by the window sat me son, alone without honor with a cup of coffee and a laptop. My first instinct was to leave without being noticed. But then our eyes met and I saw his eyes widen in surprise. It was too late to hide. Edwin got up from his seat and walked uncertainly toward me. Mum, Hesed as if he couldn't believe his eyes. You look good. And I did look good. I had lost weight over the past few months thanks to dieting and regular walks. My hair, which I used to just pull back in a bun, was now neatly trimmed into a modern shortcut. And I had stopped wearing shapeless pants and blouses, replacing them with more stylish clothes that Doris, a former style consultant in my past life, had helped me choose. Thank you, I replied modestly. You look good too. That was a lie. Edwin looked exhausted. His skin was pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and he had clearly lost weight. The once proud way he dressed had faded into something rumpled and unkempt. His shoulders slouched under a weight that wasn't just physical. Can I buy you a coffee? He asked gently. If you have time, of course. I hesitated. My instinct told me to say no, to keep walking, to protect my heart from reopening old wounds. But I looked at him again, and the mother in me saw what I couldn't ignore: a man clearly at the end of his rope. Okay, I said quietly. I have a little time. We sat down at a small table by the cafe window. Edwin ordered tea for me. He remembered I couldn't have coffee because of my diabetes. That small gesture surprised me. How's your health? He asked after an awkward pause. Stable, I replied. There have been a few minor crises, but nothing serious. I'm following my doctor's advice. That's good, he nodded, fiddling with the sugar packet. Honora and I think about you. A lot. We're worried. I raised an eyebrow. 6 months without a single call or message. That's a strange way to show concern. He looked down, ashamed. I know, I should have reached out. But after everything ... I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. You could have tried, I said simply. He nodded. I know. It's my fault. Silence settled between us, thick and difficult. I looked at him carefully, trying to find the little boy I had raised, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and bedtime. Stories. All I saw now was a man tired, burdened, and carrying regrets. How are you and Honora? I finally asked. You looked so happy in the photos from your vow renewal. Edwin hesitated, then admitted, we're going through a rough patch. We finally opened the bookstore Honora always dreamed about. We took out a big loan and invested everything. But business hasn't been good. The competition is brutal and expenses keep climbing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. I meant it. No matter what happened, I didn't want my son to fail. We're thinking of selling, he added. But that would mean losing almost everything. I didn't know what to say. I could see how much that admission hurt him. A part of me wanted to reach across the table, to comfort him. But another part, the one that still carried the pain of betrayal, wondered if that's why he had reached out today. He changed the subject. How are you managing? The house must feel big now. I'm not alone, I replied. A nurse comes by a few times a week, and your father Harrison drops in often. Edwin's face shifted at the mention of Harrison. He's still in Dallas. He moved here, I said. His company opened a new office and he bought a place nearby. And you two? We're friends, I said softly. Good friends. Edwin looked unconvinced, but he didn't press. I'm glad you're not alone. Another pause. I finished my tea and looked toward the door, wondering if it was time to leave. But Edwin was building up to something. Mum, he said finally, I want to apologize for how Honora and I treated you, trying to sell your house, making decisions behind your back. It was wrong. I see that now. I looked into his eyes. I wanted to believe he meant it, but I had to ask myself, was this remorse? Or a carefully timed move? Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. I appreciate it. And I was hoping, he took a deep breath, that we could start over, rebuild things. I miss you, Mom. The moment had come, the one I had imagined for months. I had often asked myself if Edwin apologized, would I take him back? I thought of the day I overheard them talking in the hospital hallway, about selling my house, about putting me in a care facility, about how my life, my wishes were just obstacles to their plans. Edwin, I began, I miss you too. I miss the boy I raised. But what you and Honora did, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. We thought we were doing what was best. For whom? I interrupted gently. You never asked me what I wanted. He was silent. And now, with the bookstore failing, you suddenly remember me again, I said quietly. That's hard to ignore. I swear that's not why I came, he said desperately. Yes, we're struggling, but I want to fix things. I miss my mother, I sighed. Maybe that's true, that trust isn't a force that you can turn on and off. I need time. And honestly, I don't know if I can trust you again. His face fell. I saw real pain there. And for a moment I felt a flicker of guilt. But then I remembered everything they'd done without even asking me. I understand, he said softly. But I hope, one day, maybe, you'll forgive me. Families respect each other, I said, even when they disagree. That's something you and Honora didn't do. I stood up. I have to go now, Edwin. I'm glad you're well. Can I at least call you sometimes? He asked. I paused, then nodded. You can call, but don't expect help. I won't be rescuing your business. That's your responsibility. He looked stunned, like he had hoped I wouldn't say it out loud. I understand. Goodbye, Mum. Goodbye, Edwin. Take care of yourself. When I got home, I found Harrison in my studio, studying my latest painting, a portrait of Doris. Captured her smile, he said with a warm smile. That sparkle in her eye. He turned, but when he saw my face, he came over immediately. What happened? Are you okay? I saw Edwin, I said quietly. We sat down, and I told him everything. I was done, I asked. Did I do the right thing? You did, Harrison said without hesitation. Forgiveness is noble, but so is protecting your heart. I feel guilty, I admitted. Like I'm a bad mother for not just taking him back. That doesn't make you a bad mother, he said. It makes you strong. I smiled. Thank you. For staying. For understanding. For being here. He took my hand. It feels like life gave us a second chance. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Do you believe in second chances? I didn't, he said. But now I think, maybe they're real. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the studio. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet sense of peace.